In the previous video, I made some changes to getting the product information from the Square API. In this video, I'm going to be making some changes to the checkout that sends the data to Square to create the payment link. My name is Kenny, and this is Tech Talk with RHT Services, where I talk about web development, software development, and all kinds of things related to tech, including working on projects like you see here. So in the previous video, I worked on the changes necessary to get the variation IDs from Square and to be able to loop through each of those. Now I want to be able to send those back to the Square endpoint when a payment link is created. And the reason being is because if you already have the item in Square and a customer makes a purchase, all you want to do is be able to send that item ID and the quantity of that item that the customer has requested over to the Square endpoint and let it do all of the calculations, including taxes and shipping as necessary. And thus, me not doing that on my end will less likely cause issues with the customers in the future. All right, so what I'm going to do is I have the cart contents previously done. And so looking at the Square API, when you go to create a payment link, what you need to do is to create the order item. And so actually I'm going to take this first item here and copy it out of so Square has this API, I forgot API reference, or I think this is actually the API Explorer. But the API reference is the documentation. The API Explorer is actually what you can come in here. You can put values in. It will generate the necessary code, whether you do PHP, Curl, Ruby, Python, C#, Java, or Node.js. And so all you gotta do is change the language. So this same thing being done in Python will look like this. If you want to run the curl commands because you're using some sort of shell scripting or whatnot, you can do that. But I'm using PHP, so I have it writing out the PHP content or writing things out in PHP. Since I have the latter part of what it outputted already defined in the file that sends the request over and makes the API call to Square, what I'm going to do is just update the part that it does not already have. Now, what Square does is they provide a SDK, and that's what I'm utilizing to make these calls. What I need to do is to make this adjustment here. So this should be, so if the quantity, you have to pass in the quantity of the item as the one of the values to the constructor for the order line item. That being said, I can do item.quantity right there. And then for this one, it will be the catalog product ID. So it would be item dot, I believe it's product ID. Now what I really need to do is actually rename that to variation ID instead of product ID. But for now, I will leave it as is because this is in fact not the product ID, is actually a variation ID, which is this right here defined in this JSON response from Square. All right, and so if I test this out, which I'm not going to do right now, it should work. I will test that off camera because I'll be honest, some of this stuff can be very sketchy, and I don't have automated tests at this point, so I don't think you really want to sit here and watch me do this. So order line item, I'm going to go ahead and add that, and line items is a variable up here, to which then line items is somewhere used. Yeah, there we go. So line items are down there, and so when you give it the line items, what it will do is it will calculate all of the necessary values here. So if we close this back out, and I have some, so this is using the API Explorer on the Square developer website. So what you do is you create if you're doing online orders and you want to test things out, because I am using this in the sandbox, you create the shipment. You have to have a fulfillment in order to create an order that will then be shippable. And so so you create a fulfillment and then the shipment details. Even though you don't have any of this information at the moment, you can put some values in there for the sake of putting it in there, but I wouldn't advise it unless your shopping cart system is 100% automatic and you're very timely with the things that you are going to get shipped out. All right, so then you enter in the customer information in that. And then we come down, shipping note, tracking number. We don't have any of that at the moment. The line item. So this is where it gets to this portion right here. So you can have as many line items as necessary, but ideally you want to consolidate those so that you have the increase in quality with a single line item and just increment that quantity throughout. And so here you have the catalog object ID. So this is the catalog item variation. And so what you do is you give it that variation ID, which I showed right here, which is variations ID. And so what this will do is it will map this ID to that variation and then come up with a total. And as you see, I didn't put in a dollar amount. It went and got that dollar amount from the variation ID. And as you see, this particular item is $44.95. Likewise, if we scroll down here, and let's actually open this out a little bit further. So this particular item, 76. Oh, that's the totals. I'm sorry. So the individual item is $7.99. The variation total for this is $31.96. So $7.99 times the quantity, which is somewhere in here. That's the quantity for that. So here's the quantity, $7.99 times 4, which should give you $31.96. That's $31.96. Now for context, if you're looking at that and it's like, how is that $31.96? What Square does, in the sake of simplicity, they use the lowest form of currency to put those in. So for example, the United States as well as Canada both have dollar and cents. A single cent is the smallest unit of currency that you can have. So this is technically from Square's perspective, 3,196 cents. And that's why there's no dollar sign or decimal point in that. So if you're going into like the EU, where they use the pound, and other countries where they might use yen, whatever the smallest denomination of that currency is what Square will use in that. And so that's why you see 3,196 instead of 31.96. But when you do the math on it, which in my scripts, I'm sorry, not here, in the JavaScript file, I'm actually just dividing by 100. So yeah, so if I'm ever having to display that, I created a format currency that basically takes the amount which is already in cents and divides it by 100, and then this displays that on the screen. So because Square is doing everything in cents, I set up the store and the TypeScript and everything else to operate on cents, and only if I need to display that value do I then display it in what I consider to be a human readable format with dollars and cents. All right, so back to here. So that's how that works. And if I think I need to change the item potency key. All right, and so if I run this, it gives back a 200 response, and you can open this up and you can see everything that comes through here. And there's some additional values here that I define. And then we also get the URL, which will then take me to a checkout page. And one thing that I was looking at in the developer forums here recently is that Square was having an issue where I can open this, but when I go to actually preview what that page will look like, for some reason it's defaulting to your cart is empty, and apparently there is a known bug associated with that, so I can't actually see what's in the cart. However, if I complete and go through the rest of this checkout process, it will complete and show up as a transaction in the developer dashboard within Square. So it is actually completing through, even though there's an issue with the front end aspect of things on that. That being said, that will wrap things up for this video. If you have any questions about the Square API or working with Square or building a website in general, feel free to leave a comment down below. If you enjoyed this series, also leave a comment. Let me know if you're liking this type of content. That will wrap things up for this video. Please be sure to subscribe and give me a thumbs up, and see you in the next video.